I was astounded by my own ignorance. It's a computer age. Computers seemed to be very expensive and very complicated, and they were the sort of thing that banks used as an excuse for something going wrong. And then when Sinclair first brought out the ZX81 at 70-odd pounds, I couldn't help feeling then this was a price which was cheap enough to be worth the risk.
Patrick Eager is a leading cricket photographer whose pictures are in demand all over the world. 2 years ago, he began what he thought was going to be a mild flirtation with the world of microcomputers. And like any beginner, he had to start by learning the rules of the game.
I do remember well getting the thing out of its box and plugging it into the telly and putting in 2 and then a plus and then a 2 and then an equals and wondering why on earth it didn't respond. Then there was an agonising page right at the beginning about eggs equals 57, as far as I remember, which, again, in retrospect, didn't seem quite fair. Because once one got the hang of it, and really, it wasn't that difficult. It was just a question of learning, like learning any language, whether it's French or German or BASIC.
Patrick Eager's first computer, a Sinclair ZX81, helped him, and now also his children, to learn how to write programs in BASIC. This is the language used by most personal micros, and probably the easiest for beginners to understand. Although he felt the machine was rather limited in some ways, it gave him a good idea of how a computer could really help him in his business.
Well, I'd seen some of the potential with someone who was working in a similar field to my own, and I was just frightened of spending a lot of money on software and indeed hardware. And a friend of mine who has his own computer consultancy said, well, look, borrow an Apple for a week and see how you get on. And don't go off and buy software. You know BASIC. Why on earth don't you write it yourself? And I found, in fact, it was quite possible to put programs together fairly simply. The difference between Sinclair BASIC and Applesoft BASIC is not too traumatic. I mean, I had a couple of rather worrying hours when nothing fitted, but after that it was fine. And I found that one could write quite complicated programs really quite quickly. Now I send everything out on a computer-printed delivery note, and I can call up lists of the photographs which have arrived or haven't arrived, and I can send letters chasing them up, which range from polite to extremely rude, all at the touch of a button. I mean, that's marvellous. And I can tell you, this, in the old days, was where there was such agony. Frankly, I didn't do half of it, which meant that a lot of photographs went missing, a lot of bills weren't even sent, and certainly weren't paid. The joy of it is that the longer you have it, the more you think about it, the more applications you can think of. I mean, I do all the captions on the back of my black and white prints now. You might have 10 prints, each with quite a long caption. And it's just a question of pressing a button, print 10 times. It's a simple loop in your program, and it just prints out the same thing beautifully, evenly, and without mistake, 10 times. You know, and every day one comes up with something a little bit better. It's fun.
Well, if you've just bought a computer or you've bought one for your kids and are wondering why they're spending hours typing away, maybe they're playing games or maybe they're actually writing their own programs. Well, not everybody takes to computer programming as easily as Patrick Eager did, but he says it's quite fun to have a try. Of course, the programs you write can be hard or as easy as the problems you're trying to solve, but the principles are surprisingly straightforward. We're going to begin to look at some of those fundamentals today. If you can follow what we do, you stand a good chance of being able to write some programs for yourself. Well, the first thing you're faced with is this rather intimidating keyboard, and you feel you want to type something in, so you type something like Mac, M-A-C, and it says mistake. The computer doesn't recognize Mac as an instruction. I do know it does recognize CLS, which is a command, and that means clear screen. I press the carriage return button, and it clears the screen. Now, on this floppy disk here, we have a program written, and I load it into this disk drive. I'm going to load that program into the computer's memory by typing another command, load. And the program name is Sticks. And you'll see why it's called Sticks in a moment. Hit return, and immediately it starts to load, and it's finished. Now, all we have to do I always feel a bit uncomfortable once it's loaded into the machine to actually know that it's in there. And you can very quickly check whether it's actually in the memory of the machine by typing another command, list. Hit return, and there is the computer program. And it's a sequence of instructions that the computer is going to follow one after the other. You can recognize it as basic because it's numbered down the side here. You'll see we've numbered it in tens, which allows us to put in other instructions in case we want to modify the program or to correct some errors. So all we've got to do now is to run it. And you can see why we've called the program Sticks. It looks rather like the sort of trajectory of a chopstick thrown up in a Chinese restaurant. The way a computer runs your program is similar in many ways to the way a restaurant carries out your order for a meal. It's very important to use words or instructions that the computer can understand. There's not much point coming into a Chinese restaurant speaking Italian and asking them to clean your soup. The waiter will be totally baffled. So it's important to use the right language. And in a restaurant, we've got a list of words that can be used on the menu. Similarly, in a computer, there's a list of instructions, commands, or keywords that the computer knows exactly what to do with.
Yes, sir.
I'd like the baked prawns in chili,
yes,
hot, and the beef chow mein, please.
Yes.
Ordering the meal is comparable to writing a computer program. Just as the waiter takes my order in English and converts it into shorthand, so the computer takes my instructions and translates them into a code that its central processor can deal with. The kitchen is the equivalent, if you like, of the central processing unit. Here they make up the dish that I've ordered. They don't need to know English, they just need to recognize the shorthand which the waiter has given them. The chef knows that that Chinese symbol means he's got to cook prawns and chili to make baked prawns in chili. Of course, out here, I really don't need to know what's going on in the kitchen. That is, unless I plan to run a Chinese restaurant. They've got their own ways of doing things. Equally, I do know that there are rules and regulations that govern the overall management and running of this restaurant. The equivalent on a computer is the operating system. It's the operating system, for example, which, when I type MAC on the keyboard, ensures that MAC appears on the screen. Equally, it's the management of this restaurant that makes sure that when I order baked prawns in chili, that baked prawns in chili actually does arrive.
Sure. Big prawn and chilies.
Baked prawns in chili. Thank you very much. They look delicious. And beef chow mein.
Yes.
That's beautiful. Thank you. And it really was excellent. Well, at first, a Chinese menu looks very confusing, but if you break it down to meat dishes, fish dishes, vegetable dishes, rice and sweets and so on, it very quickly makes some sort of sense. Well, similarly, as confusing as this sort of thing may appear, it's helpful to remember that in writing computer programs, there are really only 3 programming structures, and all programs are made of instructions based on these 3 ideas. A sequence, doing one thing after another, a decision, or as it's called in computer jargon, a branch. If one thing is true, do this, otherwise do something else. And a loop, doing something over and over again. We can see these 3 principles in action in everyday life. And here's something we've all had to endure in our time. We've asked this class of junior school children to put up with a slightly artificial situation for our benefit. And we're going to write a program to mimic what they and their teacher, Malcolm Rivers, are doing.
Stop there, please. Put your pencils down. We're going to do some tables work this morning. I'm going to think of 2 numbers. I want you to multiply them together in your head and then give me the answer. Claire, 6 8s.
48.
That's correct. Nicholas, 3 4s.
12.
That's correct. Well done. Oliver, 9 9s.
42.
No, that's not correct. Simon, 8 4s.
We'll break down what he's been doing into simple steps. First, a sequence, one thing after another. He's thinking of 2 numbers between 1 and 12 in his head. And of course he knows, or at least he should do, what the correct answer is. Next he asks the question, what is the first number times the second? Then he receives an answer from a child. But now he makes a decision. If the reply the child gives is right, he says one thing. If not, he says another. And then last of all, he goes back and asks the next question. In other words, he repeats the process again. Well, that gives a pretty simple design for our program. I think it's always important to have something written down on paper to work on before you start tapping away at a keyboard. Well, the first thing Malcolm was doing was thinking of two numbers in his head. So we need to do the equivalent of this electronically. Inside the computer, we need to create what we call variables. Well, I think of a variable as an electronic box that we give it a name to. The contents can vary, but the name stays the same. In Patrick Eager's eggs equals 57, which you found so amusing, eggs is the name of the variable, 57 is the number stored in the electronic box called eggs. Well, we can start off with Malcolm's first number, and we'll call the variable first, and his second number second. And he had to think of a number between 1 and 12. We'll do it with a pair of dice. His first number is 11. So we'll store that in that variable. Second number, which he thought of, is a 6, and so we'll store that there. And then he multiplied the two together, and in his head he kept the answer, which we'll call correct. And 6 11s are 66, and that's the number that he has in his head. Well, we can program that now on the computer, and some genius has programmed it so I don't have to type in every word. I wish all programming was done like this. All I have to do is to touch the space bar and automatically the instructions come up. It's absolutely marvellous. Well, the first variable, first, we've called first, is R&D brackets 12 is a random number between 1 and 12, which is exactly what he was thinking of in his head. The next one is 20. Line 20, second equals a random number between 1 and 12, and then we multiply them together to get the number he has in his mind. Correct equals first, and the asterisk means multiply, times second. Well, the next thing he did was to ask a question, and we get the computer equally to ask us a question. Print, and after the print, in inverted commas, whatever appears between the inverted commas is actually printed out on the screen. What is first? And it will take the contents of first and put them in there. Again, in inverted commas, times second. It will take the contents of the variable second and put it in there. So print, what is first times second? Well, when he's asked the child that, the child will give a reply. And we create another variable called reply. So Malcolm says, what is 6 times 11? And the child may answer 56. And that's his reply. So we call this variable reply, and it will contain that number. So we need to have a method of getting that number into the computer itself. So the next instruction, and here is a command input, that's the computer asking us from input from the keyboard, and we will input a number which will be stored in the variable reply. So we've done that, ask a question, get a reply, and now we go on to, is the reply correct? So far, that's a sequence of instructions. They're obeyed one after the other. Now we come to the branch, which is a very key part of any computer technology. If reply, which is the number that's been input from the keyboard, is equal to correct, then print, and inverted commas again, right. Else, and that's quite important, that else, not otherwise or, it's just part of the language of BASIC that we're particularly using on this machine. Else, print, inverted commas again, wrong. And that's a nice little program, and it will run, and we can actually do that. I simply type run. What is 11 times 9? 45. I really do know the answer, of course, but I'm really testing the program. Wrong. So it's right. Ha, got that one. Run again. What is 5 times 1? 4. Wrong. Run again. What is 8 times 10? 80. Right, so that little program is working. Now, before we make the program more sophisticated, let's ask our teacher, Malcolm Rivers, to try a different approach with his class.
Now, this time when I ask you a question, if you get it right, I'll tell you that's right. But if you get the answer wrong, you can have 3 goes to see if you can get it right. So keep guessing. Daniel. 6 9s.
47.
No, that's not correct. Try again.
56.
No, that's not correct. Try again.
59.
No, that's not correct. The answer is 54. Ruth, 6.
So he's going around the class from child to child, giving each one 3 chances to get the right answer.
Jen,
And if the answer is
4
still
9s.
wrong after 3 tries, he tells the child the correct value.
Susan, 6 7s.
42.
That's correct.
Well, I'm not sure who was testing who there, but I've got a shrewd idea those kids really did know the answers. But what we need to do now is to introduce the first of some fairly simple loops into our program. It's very boring to have to type run every time we want to run it. And what we're going to do is to repeat this loop here between print what is first times second, the question, and then if reply correct, then print right or wrong. And you can now see why we've left these gaps here between the lines, between 30 and 40. We can just number a line 35 and put repeat in there, and in line 70 until reply equals correct. And that program would then go on repeating itself and repeating itself until we got the correct answer. Well, that itself is not quite good enough. What Malcolm did do was to give the children 3 goes. So we create another box, another variable here, which we'll call try. And what we have to do is to set it to 0 every time we go to a new child. So we start off at 0. So Malcolm asks the question, what is 11 times 6? He knows the answer, 66. The child says 56. It's a wrong answer, so we add 1 to try and upgrade it. That's his first go. So we need to introduce a new instruction within the body of the program. Say 32, try equals 0, so that every time we have a new child, that gets reset to 0. Now, this is our loop, and every time we go around the loop, we want to increase try by 1. And there's this curious-looking formula here, which simply means every time we go through the loop, add 1 to the variable try. And we want down here, he did it until the reply was correct, or try was equal to 3. In other words, he gave the child 3 tries. But what else he did was after 3 tries, then he told the child the correct answer. And we put in one final statement which says, if reply, and this less than and greater than means not equal to, if reply is not equal to correct, then print, in inverted commas once again, the correct answer is correct. Well, that program would run quite well, but he wants to run it for every child in the class. So he's got 25 children in the class, so we come across a different type of loop. This particular loop here was repeated until certain conditions were fulfilled. This loop we're going to repeat a fixed number of times. In this case, 25 times. There are 25 children in the class. So right up at the top of the program here, we simply say, for child equals, and that's a new variable, child again, child equals 1 to 25, and right down at the bottom here, next child, and that will continue to repeat this program until 25 children have had their shot. So let's try and run it. What is 4 times 1? 3. I really know the answer to that, but it really tests out some of the branches in the program. What is 4 times 1? 2. What is 4 times 1? 6. Wrong. The correct answer is 4, which is indeed correct. What is 4 times 3? 12. Right. Well, this is a relatively simple program and it works all right, but when it runs it's rather badly laid out. You can see these gaps here, you can see the confusion, but it is quite fun and it would help give a child some sort of practice in doing their multiplication tables, at least up to 12. But however clever we make it, we'd still be only using those 3 program ideas of sequence, branch and loop. And that will be true whether we program it in BASIC, in Forth, in Fortran, or any other programming language. And for that matter, any other dialect of BASIC. This is a particular dialect of BASIC, there are many of them, but the basic fundamentals still apply. But although much ready-written software is of poor quality, there's a good deal of well-designed, well-written material which the user likes and uses, and that really is the final test. But today, graphics, colour and sound all help to make the use of computers attractive and so easy to use that even children in the classroom enjoy them. Our researcher, Catherine Robbins, has been back to that primary school in South London.
The school has only had a computer for about a term, but already most of the staff and most of the children have had some experience of using it, mainly in small groups. Some of their software has been specially written for use in schools. One of the most popular programs is this simulation, which uses low-resolution graphics to represent a little kingdom beside the Yellow River, which occasionally overflows its banks.
You get a census result of a little village which you're the owner of, and you have to decide how many people to put in the fields, how many people to defend the dike, and how many people to look after the village. There's a band of thieves who lives in the mountains who keep attacking the village to try and get the rice.
Kingdom we found fitted quite well into the overall topic that we're covering with our upper school this term, which is treasure. We've told the children that the treasure that they've got to guard is the rice, and that they're responsible for that treasure.
The thieves always come first, yeah. Oh no! They're going to be killed off by your decision. Yeah.
They're very uninhibited about the computer. They are very willing to ask questions. They obviously make mistakes, but they don't seem to have any of the fears that the adults have at all.
I thought, oh, help. The thought of approaching it, it all seemed a completely different experience to anything I'd ever dealt with before. It was the thought, first of all, of mastering the keyboard, not being a typist of any sort, and also becoming familiar with the language involved.
3,000 we can this year. I thought I was going to get it back all muddled up and everything. I was afraid to press any of the buttons or something. Oh no, I'm going to get it wrong. It's sort of frightening.
The games are quite educational. There's quite a few logic problems for them, some maths problems, even spelling problems.
And this spelling program gives an instant reward for a correct answer.
Oh no. Oh. It's called Brick Up. It says something like a tropical bird with coloured wings. You would say PA and you would spell the rest out. Parrot. Right now, get ready to fire. Correct. Oh no. Carpet. C-A. Where's R? R. What about P-I? No, carpet. E-T. Also. Sometimes you tend to come across the words when you have to write have to write exercises or write sentences, and you just sort of think, oh, I can remember how to spell that from the game. Now, where are we now? We're on there, aren't we? No, we don't. So it's 9.
Crash is a program designed to help them plan ahead and think logically.
We want 9 up. No, we want to put 10 up for safety. No. Yes, we want 2. Then we want 2 left first.
But it's also designed to let them program the computer themselves, using a simple language with instructions like L for left and F for forward.
You print into the computer directions for it to try and go through the maze and hit the target.
How does that help you with your schoolwork, then?
I don't think it does.
Well, so far the children seem to think that the computer's primary use has been for play. But what do the staff feel about its long-term educational value in schools like this?
It's got great potential. Hopefully we could like to do some programming ourselves and get some more software. And it has great educational value.
I think it's here to stay, and it's something that we've got to, become used to and obviously move forward with it.
Yes! A vote of confidence there. Most of the software you see running in this series is available from one source or another, and you can write in for details. Those 3 programmes, for example, are soon to be transmitted through CFAX as part of BBC's new telesoftware service. Well, next week, we'll look into how computers handle words and at the writing of long programmes. Until then, goodbye.